Hey everybody, welcome to Breakout Room D. Today, for this session right after lunch, we're going to hear from Brian and Keith about the intersection of FinOps and ITAM. We're going to have a bit of a Q&A once they're done, so hold your questions to the end, at which point I'll come around with the microphone. We are recording this for folks that weren't able to attend, so we'll come around and I'll pass the mic around so you can ask your questions and we can capture it in the recording. With that, I'll turn it over to Keith and Brian.
Thank you very much, Fuss.
Yeah, so my name's Keith Hiszem. I'm a senior engineer at Cardinal Health. I spent a couple years on the FinOps team, so I'm a FinOps certified pro, but currently reside on the IT asset management team.
And hey everybody, I'm Brian Adler. I'm a senior director of cloud market strategy at Flexera. As Keith will be getting into a bit, they're one of our customers, one of our many customers. And prior life, just before this, I also spent a couple years as an analyst over at Gartner, talking about folks about all things cloud, a little bit in the ITAM space, mostly about the cloud space as well. So we can kind of tie in some of those statistics and sort of things I've learned in that journey as well. So Keith's going to kick us off, and then I'll jump back in a second.
Yeah, so today we'll both be talking about ITAM and FinOps collaboration. We're going to set the stage on why it's important. Then Brian's going to get into kind of FinOps and ITAM, are they better together, the cliche. And then Brian's going to talk about also the impacts of not collaborating. And then we're going to switch gears, and I will take you through the problem that Cardinal Health was trying to solve, some of the successes, some of the failures we've had, and then what are our next steps. So first, let's set the stage. Why is FinOps and ITAM collaboration important? So Gartner projects that SaaS spending in 2025, or by 2025, is going to hit $210 billion. So that's roughly 50% of total enterprise application spends. Complementing this, the Flexera 2023 State of ITAM report highlights that 32% of SaaS is either going to go underutilized or underused. So if you do the math, that's $70 billion. And software makes up a significant portion of your public cloud spend. So it's estimated this year that spend on pay-as-you-go licenses for applications and operating software, or operating systems and software is going to be $48 billion. So that's 25% of all IS spend.
Oh, that's me. Thank you very much. So one thing I should mention, folks, as well, and I was remiss, or whatever the fancy word is, at the end of this presentation, we will have, there's a QR code where you can go ahead and download this entire presentation. So welcome to take pictures, welcome to take notes, all that kind of stuff. But if you want, when we get to the Q&A section, I'll just leave the QR code up there, and you're welcome to get access there. Okay, so talk a little bit about some of the data here behind this. Now, if you've heard of Flexera for one reason and one reason only, it might be our State of the Cloud report, right? Every year we've done the State of the Cloud report. It started back in 2012, so I think we just did our 13th one, if you will, as the RightScale State of the Cloud report. So if you're familiar with that, the RightScale State of the Cloud report, RightScale was acquired by Flexera in 2018, and along with that came the intellectual property for that report. So anyway, my point is, if you've heard of that report, that's where we're going to quote some of these stats here, and also some from our State of ITAM. We do a similar report called State of ITAM, which, as timing worked out, the 2024 one released last Wednesday, but I wasn't able to get those slides in here for publication, all that stuff. So there's the 2023 ones in here, but both Keith and I will refer to the numbers that may have changed. So with all that preamble said, the State of the Cloud report is both what we call a static and a dynamic report. And what I mean by that is that there's certain questions we ask year after year after year to look for trends, right? Want to see if things are changing and whatnot. And then there's dynamic aspects of it as well, things that are new as the market evolves. 10, 12 years ago, we weren't asking about serverless or Kubernetes, right? Obviously, we ask a lot about those. We weren't asking about Gen AI 5 years ago. We're going to start asking about that. But anyway, one of the consistent static questions we ask is, what are your top cloud challenges, right? And as you can see here, I've highlighted in red, tied for third this year is managing software licenses, right? Things that historically we haven't necessarily been focused on as much. Up 3 slots, let's try to remember, up 3 slots just from last year, right? So we're starting to realize that the cloud practitioners, if you will, and they might be FinOps, they might be cloud operations folks, whoever you want to look at, are starting to realize that, hey, I do need to worry about my cloud licenses as well. And with anything that's a challenge, It's also going to become an initiative, right? If something's a challenge, you need to address it. Okay, we're going to have an initiative in the coming year to address this thing. So we asked the similar question: which of the following initiatives are you planning to make progress on in the next year? And as you can see there, managing software licenses in the cloud is number 6, but it's up 3 slots from just 2 years ago. So again, folks are challenged with, I don't want to say struggling, that might be too hard a word, but realize that they need to worry about not just what's running in the cloud, but what's running on what's running in the cloud, if you will, right? That can be a significant contributor to the cost, if you will. And then here's this from the State of the ITAM report, which is last year's. And sort of the takeaway here, if you will, is we asked, what's the level of significant interaction between your SAM team, your software and asset management people, and the following teams within your organization? And if you notice down there at the bottom, lonely FinOps at 25%. Now the good news is that the most recent one that came out, FinOps moved up 1 slot, and it's 32%, right? So that's good, we went up. 32% is still pretty low, right? So the point is that a lot of these organizations have CCOEs, you've probably heard of that, right? The Cloud Center of Excellence. They've got SAM folks at the table, they've got FinOps folks at the table, they've got a FinOps team, they've got all the pieces in place, the table set, everybody's sitting there, but they're not putting the puzzle together yet. So I think we'll see this, well, 25, 32, I think we'll see this 32% increase over the next few years. But the point is that we're not collaborating at the level that we really need to drive the efficiencies that we want to. And I think I pass it back to you for a moment or two, and then I'm back in here, yeah?
Yep. All right. So I've heard lots of different, I don't call it analogies of kind of talking about how FinOps and ITAM intersect. I've heard like peanut butter and jelly and Tom and Jerry and, you know, the Beatles, all these sorts of things. But there's a photography technique that I think is a little bit better at illustrating how they intersect. So there's a technique called focus stacking. And when I talk about focus here, I'm not talking about like the uppercase, you know, FinOps open cost and use spec, but
full disclosure, it took me quite a while when we were working on this before that clicked, so I was very ignorant. So thank you for that.
Yeah, specific call out here. So,
Yeah.
but focus stacking, it's a photography technique used to achieve a greater depth of field by layering or stacking images together. So if you think of FinOps having their own snapshot, their own kind of snapshot of the IT asset landscape, FinOps has their own snapshot, enterprise architecture, InfoSec. If you think about those different focuses and you layer them all together, you're going to get a much deeper, much more comprehensive picture of your IT asset landscape.
Back to me already. So we'll talk a little bit about, as the slide here alludes to, why does this ITAM stuff matter if I'm a FinOps practitioner, right? So we'll talk a little bit about why it matters, the benefits of collaborating, what happens if you don't collaborate. So it's sort of the next theme, if you will. A lot of words on here, and as I said, there's a QR code for you to download this later, so I'm not going to go through each and every one of them, but I'll pick and choose a few. So you're a FinOps practitioner, your company's running in AWS. Okay, well, dedicated hosts, when they came into existence, what, 10, 12 years ago, whatever it was, their main reason for existence was for licensing purposes, right? Back in the day, back in my day, right, we had, you know, software licenses that were tied to IP addresses. Okay, you can get an elastic IP in AWS, but that's extra hassle and cost and all this kind of stuff. But I also have dealt with, and maybe you have dealt with, licenses that were tied to a MAC address, right? The old media access control, the physical MAC address, all right? Well, good luck getting a static MAC address in the cloud unless you get a dedicated host, right? Now, there's other benefits to these things nowadays, but when they originally came on the scene, that was their whole goal in life, if you will. If you're running any Microsoft software in EC2 that has the software assurance and license mobility contract associated with it, you're going to be very much worried about your license concerns there, right? It can really drive the price up. If you're in Azure, this is probably the most common one, if anyone's heard of any of these terms. Azure Hybrid Use Benefit, AHUB or HUB, Hybrid Use Benefit. Basically, if you have a SQL Server license, Windows Server, Managed SQL, there's a few different variants. You have an on-prem license for that particular software package. If it meets all the, you know, you have to be this tall to ride the ride. If it meets all the different criteria, it's the right version, you have the right support contract, blah, 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 all that stuff. You can leverage that SQL Server license or whatever it is to use in the Azure public cloud, right? And we have some financial examples here in a bit that talk about that. Red Hat and SUSE, not necessarily just in Azure, but I just threw it in there. You have a licensed, I always say this back, licensed Linux distro, right? You know, you're going to be paying a license associated with that. You need to worry about where that's running, and are you not in line with the entitlements associated with that? Google Cloud Platform, sole tenant nodes, that's their dedicated host, same basic concept there as well. Custom images, could have put that anywhere, but I threw it into Google, right? And we've probably all done this, I've done this. I've been, you know, fired up an instance, I've installed all my software, configured everything, put all my configuration files on there, taking a snapshot, my golden image, right? And I go ahead and I fire off that golden image in a bunch of places so I know I get the exact same cookie. I got my cookie cutter, I'm gonna get the exact same cookie. Well, what if there's licensed software bundled in there, right? And now I'm running that, so what's gonna be the cost implications of running that licensed software where it wasn't originally intended? And then containers, that's a whole new world, right? We won't even get into that, but imagine that you're used to running a software package that's licensed on a per socket basis for a month, and I ran a fraction of a core for a fraction of an hour. What am I gonna get charged, right? I don't even want to think about that, right? So there's all kinds of considerations that you need to worry about from a financial perspective that are associated with that. FinOps and ITAM, we'll talk a little bit about how they share some similar principles and domains. And this is from, Ron, are you in the audience? Ron, there, Ron Brill, please raise your hand. Please, Ron, I'm gonna embarrass you, all right. So our good friends at Angle Point put these next few slides together. They've been changed a little bit and they've been purple-fied, right? And the FinOps folks are all putting all their purple stuff on here. But anyway, want to give a shout out to Ron and his team for helping us with these originally. But what you see here on the left is the current FinOps framework principles, right? What we're trying to show here is that they're very similar to what ITAM people have been doing all along, right? Everyone, teams need to collaborate, obviously, in the ITAM world as well. Everyone takes ownership for their cloud usage. Everyone takes ownership for their IT asset usage, right? Whatever the IT assets that you're consuming. A centralized team drives FinOps. A centralized team drives the ITAM practice as well. Reports should be accessible and timely. Absolutely, right? In the FinOps world, it might be, I don't want to find out at the end of the month that I've been running an M5 double XL when I could have been running an M5 large, right? I want to find out that day. I want to see I'm over provisioned so I can take corrective actions. Similarly, I don't want to find out at the end of the month that I've been out of compliance with an Oracle license for the last 29 days, right? I want to find out immediately so I can take the rectifying steps there as well. So very similar concepts. Decisions are driven by the business value of the cloud, or decisions are driven by the business value of those IT assets, obviously. And then lastly, and maybe a little less so on the IT asset side, because it's not as common, but take advantage of the variable cost model where you can. So again, these two disciplines share, very similar principles. They also share very similar domains, right? And this is updated to the new FinOps framework V2, right, which came out recently, but it was true when it was V1 as well. Understanding cloud usage and cost, understanding IT asset usage and cost, right? You absolutely want to understand what you're running out there and how much it's costing you. Dropping down one, now that I understand it, I want to optimize it. I want to optimize my cloud usage and costs. I want to optimize my IT asset usage and cost. And then upper right, quantify business value, right? I want to know what is the business value I'm getting from these resources that are running in the cloud. I want to know what the business value I'm getting from these IT assets that I'm using, right? The software licenses and such. And then lastly, managing the practices, right? Managing the practices there. So they share these similar principles. They share these similar domains. There's always a but, right? But they don't always have the same focus, right? And that's not necessarily a bad thing. So you look here, the green check mark is typically a focus of that discipline. A red X is typically not, and a yellow is, well, maybe they should, right? And if you look at here, probably no big surprising if you go down a column. ITAM is focused on on-prem stuff, on-prem hardware, software licensing, all those kinds of things. The FinOps side, more focused on, obviously, the cloud spend and the agility and whatnot, right? And I've used this slide a couple times, and I always say this, and I've never done it, but I should have a slide where these two columns merge together, and look, it's turtles all the way down, right? So it's green check marks all the way down, right? You get all the goodness as you bring these two disciplines together. So they have similar principles, they have similar domains, but they're not necessarily communicating and working together, but here's the benefits if they did, right? So what happens if we don't? Well, let's talk a bit about some impacts where the FinOps and the ITAM folks should be, or what happens if they're not working together as they should. In a hybrid environment, where you deploy your software really matters, right? So here's an example from Oracle. I don't know if there's any Oracle folks in the room, but not to ding you guys in any way, shape, or form. These are rack rates off their public website, right? You're running this particular Power Edge configuration, and on an annual basis, it's about $237,000 to run this, okay? You move that into AWS, and you turn on EC2 Active Failover, which is a recommended best practice, price doubles. Right? You take that same thing, you move it into VMware, you have it on 2 ESXi hosts, and they don't share the same back end. Again, the price doubles. And sorry, I always laugh. One of my teammates put this together as well, and the last column is not mine, but you could put it in containers. I personally would never do that, but you could. And if you did that, and you did weekly rebuilds, which is a recommended best practice, voila, the price goes up 4 times, right? This isn't twice the performance or 4 times the performance or anything like that. It's the same basic thing for 4 times the cost, right? So where you put this stuff really matters. So you have to focus on that as well. Another example, so Oracle doesn't feel singled out. IBM WebSphere, and this one jumps all over the place, right? Look at this, the server configuration, 33K. You put it in a virtualized environment, it drops down to 12. You put it in the cloud, about 16.8, still less than half the price of the server configuration. You run it in containers and you don't have a license service, 25K. You the same configuration with a license service drops down to 6, right? So imagine if you're, the FinOps person who's, whoa. There we go. Imagine you're the FinOps person that's, responsible for running all these resources wherever they're running, but you have no knowledge of the licenses. Or vice versa, you're the ITAM person who's responsible for these licenses, but you have no idea where it's running, right? Bring these folks together, because otherwise you could end up spending, instead of $6,300, you might be spending $33,000, right? And the software costs can oftentimes overwhelm the infrastructure costs. What you're seeing here is a snapshot, screenshot from the Azure pricing calculator, I believe it's called. And what this is, and I've added a red box and the percentages at the bottom, but the rest of it is just a screenshot. And what this is showing for this particular configuration, the cost of the compute instances is about $324. These are monthly costs. About $324, which is about 12% of this grand total we're going to see. The Windows license is about 9% of that, or $268 a month, right? So $324 plus that $268 just to get Windows on there. But look at that, SQL Server, right? Almost $2,200, or almost 80% of the cost is just that SQL Server license, right? So imagine this scenario. This is what you're planning, and the FinOps person comes along and says, hey, you know what? I've got a reserved instance. I can knock that $324 down to $160. I can knock you in half. And everybody's high-fiving and patting each other on the back, right? But then the ITAM person comes along and says, you know what? I got a SQL Server license, an AHUB one for this, and that $2190 goes to 0, right? That's where you're going to see these real effective financial benefits, right? So bring these folks together. Maybe you can save the $160 and the $2,200, right? And everybody wins. So the point is, these folks need to work together because, better together. I know it's a cliche, but in certain instances of life, it's really, really true. And then this is from another example. This is from the Azure, I think they call it the hybrid benefit savings calculator, again, from the Azure site. And showing that if you had 100 of these 32 core servers and you were using Azure Hybrid Use Benefit for them, if you didn't have the Hybrid Use Benefit, you'd be paying $238,000 on a monthly basis. You have a 45% savings. That would drop down to $107K a month if you were able to use the Azure Hybrid Use Benefit. And over a year, that's $1.3 million in savings, right? Now, granted, this is one of those best cases. I doubt there's any of you that have 100 of these 32 core licenses laying around. But the point being, even if you only had one of them, you're still saving 45%, right? And 45%, regardless what number you start with, 45% is a lot less than that number. And then lastly, this is a screenshot of, it's from AWS, it's one of their WAF, well-architected frameworks. If you guys are familiar with that, it's somewhere buried deep in one of their documents, but it talks about this. I've added the bit in yellow to highlight it there, but basically they're saying, hey, when you run stuff in AWS, you might want to look at dedicated hosts, going back to the previous slide we talked about, because this can save up to 50% on Amazon EC2 instance costs, since Windows licenses account for approximately half the half of the instance costs. So again, right? It's not just the LCD, I call it the least common denominator, compute, network, and storage. All right, I've gotten good at, we're FinOps people. We've gotten good at reducing the price on that. It goes beyond that. It's not just what's running in the cloud, it's what's running on what's running in the cloud. And I think I passed it back here to Keith, to talk a little bit about Cardinal Health's journey, if you will.
Sure, thank you. So I'll talk a little bit about the problem we are trying to solve for. So why did we need an asset management tool? So I'm going to break it into a couple categories here. Visibility, optimization, and then security. So first, we had an unclear understanding of our software compliance. This can lead to audit risks. Audits are expensive, they're time-consuming. If we look at the graph on the right, this is again from last year's State of ITAM report, but 3% of organizations reported spending over $25 million as a result of audits by software vendors over the last couple of years. This number actually went up to 4% this year. So that's a lot of money that, theoretically you didn't have budgeted for because you got dinged on your compliance. Not sure if we have shadow IT. Do we have, any unsanctioned purchases? Are people just buying stuff, outside of process or unauthorized purchases? And how do we know that if somebody leaves the company, they don't have access still to our applications and therefore might also retain a license? And then optimization, so unnecessary spending. Not sure if we had duplicate purchases. Did somebody, in one business unit here buy this software and another business unit bought the same software? How do we know? Unused licenses is another big one. And this can be as simple as, we bought 10 licenses, we're only using 2, how do we know that? Or it could get into more detail. You have a device-based license and somebody keeps logging onto machines and it looks like you're using all these licenses and it's one person. I don't know how many of you work for, federal government, but NASA, I think it was last year, spent like $15 million as a result of using Oracle licenses or having unused Oracle licenses. They didn't have a software asset management practice that was centralized, and I think they spent another $20 million on a couple other. So $35 million because they weren't managing their licenses.
And Keith, let me jump in there. I know we didn't rehearse this part. Let me jump in here real quick and tell you. So for example, right, when we've had these conversations offline, is that you don't have that $5 million or the $35 million in your pocket ready to pay these things, right? This is unexpected costs, right? So this is going to have a ripple effect to the rest of your organization. Hey, that new expansion you're doing in that new region? Not going to happen. 10 new people we want to hire? Not going to happen, right? Because I have to use that money for these other things. And that can have lasting repercussions that ripple through many years of your business.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard of multiple examples of, companies are getting ready to do, buy a new software or something and it goes by the wayside because they got hit with unexpected expenses. And then security risks. Do you have unmanaged or outdated assets? Do you have software that needs patched and you don't know about it? Do you have something that you need to upgrade and you're going to have to buy extended support because you have it? All that life cycle stuff, end of life, end of support. And now with the advent of a lot more SaaS applications, do we have a process to offboard people when they leave the company? Do we actually know what's going to happen? So spoiler alert, we chose Flexera as our software. And so these are some of the bigger benefits that we have gained from using Flexera. And this is not a comprehensive list by any stretch, but some of the bigger ones that have led to other better outcomes. And so number one is visibility. We know what software we're running, we know where it's running, we know who's using it, we know how big it is. And then with that data, we have all this, it's all been normalized. So with on-prem software, it could be different versions and different names. I think I saw the averages where if it's a software vendor, it could be 10 different naming conventions. Microsoft with a capital M, lowercase, all caps, all sorts of versions. Software versions, it was like 20 different was the average. So all this data we have now normalized that we can consume it. And not only is it normalized, it's also enriched. So we have HR data, we have life cycle data, spend data, all sorts of things that help us consume it and better outcomes, which we'll get to in the next couple of slides. And then it's also empowering our stakeholders. We have, all our product owners can go and pull their own reports, they can look at dashboards, they can look at their license and compliance, they can drill down, and we can be freed up to do other things. So this is kind of our data pipeline, if you will. On the left side, we have where we're ingesting the data, to the right where we're going to be consuming it. So one of the ways we discover our data is we use Flexera agents. So we have agents on all of our laptops, desktops, and then we also have it on our golden images for our VMs. We're also using some other kind of supplementary data sources like SCCM for Microsoft devices, Jamf for our Mac, Tanium, SAP. We are connected to the cloud providers, so we're bringing in our Google and our, in our case, AWS inventory data. And then we're also connecting to SaaS applications, which is a little bit newer. But if we have a SaaS platform like Microsoft or Salesforce, we can use APIs, connect directly, and ingest, email and last login and license type, things like that. So now that we have all this inventory data, we take it and it's aggregated together. So we start to bring in our usage. We start to bring in risk. Flexera has an automated identification engine, and it uses to identify all these software, manufacturer, product, a little bit extra stuff to identify, like what software it is. And then we're also normalizing that data and then removing all the duplicates. So we're taking it all down to getting it to the point where we can actually consume it. I think they talked about it this morning with focus. similar things of normalizing the data. You don't have to spend all that time, and then you can get to consuming it. It's in essence the same thing, only with our internal asset data. And then Flexera has something called Technopedia, which is their curated catalog or taxonomy of hardware and software data. So we're taking that data and we're enriching it. I think it's like over 5 million products now, and adding categories. Is it a commercial software where we have to pay for it? Is it freeware where I don't have to pay for it? Open source info. We can use our purchase info, so like our POs, our org structure, all that stuff. And that gets us to the point where we can consume the data and start to actually make data-driven decisions. So this is, again, not all of the outcomes, and it's kind of changing over time where we used to be only license and compliance, and now we're able to use this data for a whole host of things. Number one still being visibility. We can see the software that's in our environment. We're taking that software and then we're enriching our CMDB with it. Life cycle management. So all of that life cycle data that, end of life, end of support, our InfoSec team loves this data. So they've actually taken it and uploaded it into Archer. I don't know if any of you guys use Archer, and they're using it for Archer items now. And so they're using this data. Our stakeholders are also using this data. So if I'm a product owner or a solution owner, I know what my license and compliance is. I can drill down and see who's using it. I can see where it's installed on what machines. I can see, last login date, who hasn't, who said they're going to use the software and haven't. So we can start to clean things up. We can remediate. Our EA team is looking at software standards. So maybe we have 15 versions of the same software, or maybe we have 15 different visualization softwares. And so how do we use that to start to really enforce our standards? The security vulnerabilities. So there's another product that Flexera calls Security Research. And so InfoSec can look at all the vulnerabilities that are out there, the CPEs and the CVEs and things like that. And so they're using a lot of the data now. And then importantly, again, is that audit risk. We're able to mitigate a lot of that audit risk because we know what our license and compliance is. Flexera also partners with a lot of these software vendors like IBM and Oracle. And so Flexera gets like IBM's catalog once a month. And some of this information is used in that automated identification engine. And so if I were to get audited and maybe they found a little bit of a file, it might get flagged. Well, Flexera is doing kind of that same work by identifying those remnants to where we can clean them up before we get audited, so that if we ever do, which happens, that we're prepared and we're not going to get dinged by it. So now we're going to talk a little bit about some of the successes and failures that we've had, since we've done this. This is, mileage may vary. This is our experience, Cardinal Health's experience with Flexera. This may not be your experience. But again, the biggest one is that visibility. Without that visibility, none of these others are going to be possible. We've been able to identify like unsanctioned spend, people using their corporate credit cards to buy software. So we're able to enact policies to, to stop that stuff. And with the advent of the marketplace, working with the FinOps team, and at least at Cardinal, SaaS falls under ITAM, and so working with the FinOps team to identify that software purchases so we can get to the next one, licenses and compliance. We're trying to increase that centralized view of all the software in our environment. FinOps wants to see all the cloud assets. As software asset management, I want to see all our software assets and everything associated with that. And then with that comes everybody's favorite of optimization and being able to really save dollars at the end of the road. And this can be in a variety of forms. We have used Flexera for saving money on renewals, so being able to right-size those, reduce our license counts because we have reduced usage. It could be license off the rails here. License reclamation. A lot of products where we just needed to do cleanup, where maybe somebody logged into different devices and it's taking up a license, or maybe there's a file remnant and because of the way it's set up, I'm still consuming a license. And SQL Server is another big one. We've been able to really dig into Not only like, am I using a license or not, but a little more complex things like who's using, SQL Server Enterprise or Standard? Do they need to be using Enterprise? Can they get by with Standard? Or is it a non-prod environment? Can we get by with Developer, which is free? So we've really been able to start to optimize our SQL Server licenses, which also is SQL Server on demand. So we've identified licenses that we're buying as pay-as-you-go in Google. Well, we have SQL Server licenses literally sitting on the shelf, but yet we're paying at a higher price to buy them in the cloud. So remediating that to use the licenses that we already own and we just aren't using. And failures. So opportunities to improve, and this is probably more on the human side of things. This is not Flexera side of the house. Just kind of some lessons learned as we have done this over the last couple of years. And the first one, report credibility, a lot of similar aspects to FinOps. Putting data out there before maybe it was verified correct. There's a lot of complexities with licenses, use rights and rules, things like that, contract interpretations. And so there are some human aspects to setting up those licenses. And so putting it out there, what might be as fact, and then maybe the product owner coming back and saying, hey, that's not accurate. So really working with those product owners or the people who know the products better than even we do, to making sure what we're putting out there is correct. And then another thing is just internal organizational limitations. There are some other features we would love to use that Flexera has, like business service mapping, but because of some of the security limitations we have, we're not able to take advantage of some of those scanning type efforts and things like that. So just, we're hoping to be able to take advantage of some of those features in the near future, but not there yet. And then just understanding best practices with FinOps, how FinOps and ITAM overlap or intersect with the different things we're doing. The special interest group has a lot of great white papers out there. There's some IBM licensing, Microsoft, some of the others I don't remember, but there's a lot of great content on the website. And it's been really kind of eye-opening as I came from the FinOps side to the ITAM side. Either side has no idea what the other's doing. I had no idea what ITAM did, and the ITAM team has no idea what the FinOps team does. So understanding where they intersect those best practices is really important. And just like any other company, probably a big company, we're really siloed. At least our Cardinal, FinOps, and ITAM are in totally separate orgs, and therefore, historically, there hasn't been a lot of collaboration until recently, which is, it's really starting to pay dividends. And so what are our next steps? So these might seem basic, they might seem really simple, but unfortunately, they're really necessary for us. And so first and foremost, communicate. We need to have a clear understanding of the roles and responsibilities of FinOps and ITAM, within your company, within our company, especially where they overlap, especially with SaaS now and marketplace purchases, understanding how those intricacies play out. Like we talked about earlier, if you're right-sizing a server, well, it's got a core-based license on it, are you out of compliance or things like that. There can be a lot of ripple effects from that. Forming a cloud center of excellence at one time or another, we did have one. It went by the wayside. It won't be coming back, if I had to guess. And I heard it mentioned, I think, in the last week's 2024 State of ITAM report, too, about everybody having a seat at the same table. Right. FinOps, ITAM, InfoSec, EA, all the teams that, impact those decisions. It's like marketplace is one of those where, ITAM isn't involved, but FinOps is, and, we should be, and things like that. So it's been a learning experience, but that's one of the things we'll bring back.
Let me go off script here one more time for you, right?
Yep.
So, this made me think of it. Your previous slide, you were talking about, the silos that you guys have, right? We at Flexera, we talk to, hundreds of customers and prospects, and we see this so much, right? What our messaging used to be, right? We kept talking about, hey, we really need to see ITAM and FinOps converge, right? And one of our customers at our customer advisory board brought up a really good point. So we're going away from that converge word and more towards collaborate, right? For example, they said, hey, our ITAM team reports through our CISO, right? Our Chief Information Security Officer. we're never going to converge with these folks over in FinOps that are over in this different part of the org because we have these very specific rules and regulations we need to meet with, right? And we're like, okay, that's a good point. So it's not so much about converging or reporting in the same structure. It's about breaking down those silos and just collaborating, however y'all do it, right? The point is that these folks really need to talk to each other. Hopefully we've shown you the financial implications if they don't. But the point is that don't necessarily have to converge, but they do have to collaborate, which I know Keith has been mentioning as well a few times.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. Yeah, I don't think they're actually going to converge, but there's a lot of, it's really paid dividends.
Opportunities for improvement.
Opportunities for improvement, exactly. So, and then the last one, just kind of be a better partner. It's kind of like JR was talking about, be a better human. Just be a better partner. ITAM and FinOps we talk a lot about, but there are other allied personas like, InfoSec and EA. Understanding what each team's role is, can really benefit both teams, but also, it's going to benefit your company.
Right. And the comment you made when we were doing dry runs before about InfoSec, right? Make sure you guys include your security folks early in the process, right? Because I don't know if it's true, probably true for most of you, but the security guys at the end can say no, right? It's just, you can all the way at the end, you get everything aligned, and they could just say no, right? Make sure they're in the loop so that when they get to the end, they're not surprised, right? Keep them in the loop so that they don't give them that ability, if you will, to say, you should have said no a long time ago, no? But the point is that if you don't keep them in the loop and they see anything where it's just fear, uncertainty, and doubt, right? Their job is to keep you all safe and keep you out of the papers, right? So they're going to say no because that's the safest way to do that, right? So keep them involved so that, there's no surprises at the end. So
I think that's it.
Do me a favor, pop up that QR code for folks who want to see it, see if there's any questions.
There's the QR code.
All right, let's round of applause for Brian and Keith. That was a great talk. Thanks for walking us through that. I love that you talked about the silos. From my experience, that's usually the way they operate independently. Mm-hmm. And we have been very intentional in the framework by using the word intersect because we understand that these teams need to collaborate. And you touched on the allied personas as well, right? So we're and if you haven't all visited and seen the resources that Brian and Keith mentioned on their slides, thanks to you all, we have a really rich set of ITAM FinOps resources on our website. So I want to thank you all for helping us make those very robust. So with that, I'm going to open it up to questions. Just raise your hand. I'll bring the microphone over. A reminder, we just want to capture your question in the mic for the folks that aren't here, so it's in recording. All right, question over here, and I'll come back.
Hi there. I have two questions. The first, you mentioned with Flexera, you're bringing in cloud data. What cloud data are you specifically bringing in, and what's unique about it that you're doing in Flexera?
Sure. I'll talk about that from our side, and then Keith can talk about what they're doing in particular. So from the cloud billing side of things, right, we're a cloud optimization platform, FinOps platform, if you will, right? So it's all the cloud billing data, all the stuff that you'd have, anything that comes in your cloud bill. One of the differentiators, so I'm going to do I'm not a sales guy, but I'm going to be one for about 30 seconds here. One of the other things we do is we have something called CBI, which is our common bill ingestion feature. And what that allows you to do is ingest the billing constructs from any other cloud or any other related service. So we have folks that are like using Alibaba Cloud. We have folks that are pulling in support costs and labor costs and taxes and all this other stuff to give you that true TCO, right? I might be able to say, hey, the infrastructure costs for this app are X, but you're not thinking about your labor and your support and your taxes and your markups and your markdowns, all that stuff. We can do that as well. So when we say cloud, it's the billing, all the usage and billing data.
Okay. And quick second question, with Flexera, and maybe with your company example, are you doing any automated chargebacks for those licenses?
Automated chargebacks. So we have the ability to do that, right? Through our ITAM product and our FinOps product. One of the things we can do is we can do automated, so markups and markdowns are easy to do within the platform as well. Also, the way that usually comes into play is that we have companies that have reserved instances, right? Hey, I saved 30% on this, and I'm going to charge you the full rack rate and keep it for myself, right? So they can do the markups that way. So, but the short answer is yes, there's a bunch of different ways to skin that cat or whatever.
Okay.
And we had a question up front here.
Hi, you mentioned you don't do internal scans, so I'm assuming you're talking about discovery of user access, or you're talking about discovery through, like, say, Ariba and certified P-card payments, things like that?
Yeah, what is it, CASB? We're not able to scan network devices to discover things.
Okay.
Yeah,
If you open it wide open to us, we can do anything, but I realize no one's going to do that, so there's always caveats,
So if you don't have that discovery methodology, how are you identifying what is your SaaS footprint? how do you know what are all the SaaS applications in use? Are you only limiting it to the ones that procurement has transacted and is aware of? And what about SaaS applications that team member XYZ has decided, ooh, this looks interesting, I'm going to sign up for a trial version, and yes, I give you access to my internal drives.
Right, so we can ingest the procurement data, however you want to call it, from the marketplace, from the vendor directly. We've got all that, yes. So there's multiple avenues, or whatever the right phrase is, to get all that procurement data into the system as well. Yep.
Any other questions? I'll bring the mic right over.
All right, cool. Well, I just want to say thank you. And also, folks, there's a Flexera booth out there kind of right outside the grand ballroom. If you have any questions, go and look for my colleagues that are in a different color. I feel like the guy from Star Trek where they boom me down. I have the wrong colored shirt on. Means I'm probably not coming back, but they'll all be over there to help you wearing blue shirts, all right? So,
Thanks,
thank
Brian.
you.
Thanks, Keith. Round of applause.
Thank you.
And enjoy your next breakout session.
Thanks for watching. Check out more FinOps X 2024 content on our YouTube channel on the 2024 playlist. Support our channel by liking, subscribing, clicking the notification bell, and by leaving comments and questions for our speakers. We appreciate your support.